Guy Fawkes Day or Glorious Revolution Way. I am, as always, your host, Christopher Paul Dugdale, MEDMA. We are Duncanville High School in these United States, and today is October 26, 2020. And on this date in 1884 was the shootout at the OK Corral. That's when Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, with Earp's two brothers, faced down a group of 7 people in the OK Corral. Most of the shootouts that have been talked about throughout history never really happened, but this is one that actually happened. Mainly they were trying to get people to move out to a place that really sucked a farm and ranch. So, way to go, U.S. Let's trick some immigrants into going out and then complain about, whatever we complain about. So, now it's time to go ahead and talk about what happens with the royal family. Now, if you remember, the War of Roses is what put the Tudors into the royal house in the first place. And you have Henry VIII, who's the grandson of Henry VI, who does that. Henry VII, who consolidates power. And then you finally come to Henry's children. You have Edward VI, who dies because he's made out of illness. You have Mary, who is the daughter of Catherine of Aragon, who is one of the daughters, is a child of Ferdinand and Isabella from Columbus lore. And then you have the woman that Henry gave everything up for, and her daughter, in Elizabeth, who was really probably the greatest ruler in the history of England. Okay? So, once Elizabeth dies, see, one thing you may or may not know, and I know none of you are married yet, and hopefully none of you are engaged, but if you're a virgin, you generally don't have children unless you're in the show Jane the Virgin. So, when she doesn't have any children, they have to go to a family member, and that is James VI of Scotland. Okay? His mom was Mary of Scots, who was beheaded by Elizabeth I. By the way, you don't need to remember any of this crap I'm telling you right now. I'm just trying to explain to you how all these people are related. And so Henry VIII's niece was Mary, Queen of Scots, and his great-nephew was James VI. So when James VI becomes the King of England, he becomes James I. There, I've simplified everything for you in no way whatsoever. So, one of the first things he does, James I, is he combines the thrones, but he starts colonizing the Americas. Okay? Then he has his scholars make a new version of the Bible. I forget, is it called the New International Version, or could it be the King James Version? It's the King James Version. And he believed in the divine right of kings, and he has a book that he kind of writes, done by other people mainly, called The True Law of Free Monarchies, which, we won't get into. But King James is really a jerk. And by the way, for anyone who has a hard time reading the opposing viewpoints from this time period, or if you're one of those people that read the King James Version of the Bible, it's all written with this old form of English, which is harder to understand, but I respect you if you're trying to fight your way through a version of the language that is harder to read than what everyone else does. So kudos. Go to the gunpowder plot. Remember the 5th of November. Okay? So a bunch of radical Catholics try to blow up the Parliament building, and they're led by a man by the name of Guy Fawkes. Okay? And by the way, if you're looking for the word Fawkes, there it is on the 5th line, not spelled in any way which you would expect. So he had 36 barrels of gunpowder, enough that would have completely destroyed Parliament. And he has those buried under Parliament, and he's there the night before, and he's waiting until everyone in Parliament's there, then he can go and kill everyone. But he's caught, really, through a comedy of errors. It's not because anyone in Britain is great and figure out what's going on. they accidentally discovered him. And so they end up hanging Guy Fawkes and 7 others. And then they were drawn and quartered, and parts of their bodies were put on display throughout the kingdom. Oh, happy day. So, you have James I. Whenever he dies, he's replaced by his son, Charles I. And all these people believe in the divine right of kings. I can do no wrong. God put me in this place. And so, therefore, whatever I do is God's plan. Let's go ahead and put it that way. Okay? And he creates what's called the Star Chamber. And this is a royal court that makes all types of secret and arbitrary judgments. And for the great majority of Charles' reign, so we'll say the first 24 years, and just the last few months, he didn't rule with Parliament. Okay, but he imposes taxes, and what happens is eventually there's a planned attack by Scotland to go and conquer England. He gets really desperate, and he's forced to call back Parliament to put together a standing army. But as soon as he calls Parliament back, he calls Parliament back, they put together an army, they stop the Scottish invasion. Then he tries to have the members of Parliament arrested, but instead they go to take over him. And by the way, this will change the shape of the government. It's no longer ruled by just one person, but now it's ruled by a group of people. So that's more of an oligarchy than a monarchy. And this will be one of the few steps to move into that direction. So during the English Civil War, there were 2 main sides. You have the Cavaliers. This is a group that supported the king. So when you hear the term Cleveland Cavalier, when you hear the term the Virginia Cavaliers, that's the mascot for the University of Virginia, they support the king. Remember, Virginia was named for the Virgin Queen. On the other side, you have the Roundheads, or Parliament. And they're led by a man by the name of Oliver Cromwell. And he's captured... He's not captured. He captures and executes Charles I. He accidentally cuts his head off whenever he pushes him down onto a tree stump and takes and whacks with his sword like 7 times. He completely cuts Charles I's head off. He chases all the moderate members who don't protect him away from Parliament, and he starts what's called the First Protectorate. So the monarchy is now gone. He himself is named the Lord Protector and will rule for the next 11 years before he dies. Okay? During this time, he will outlaw all plays, gambling. Christmas is canceled, so he sounds more like a villain than anything else. And he violently ends all rebellions in Ireland and Scotland. He is really harsh, but he's really effective because anyone who slightly looks at him weird, he has them violently killed. Okay? When he dies, his son really sucks, so Parliament decides they're going to bring back the monarchy. And they go to Charles the First's son. Was his name Steve or Mike? Nope. It was Charles II. That's right. Charles II was a son of Charles I. Now, Charles II had a brother, and his name was James II, after his grandfather. So talk about instability. So you have 2 people named the second running around, and they're both brothers. And by brothers, I don't mean that they're not African Americans. They're like biologically brothers. So anyone who is confused or wondering about slang terms, I am your person to halfway explain things. So Charles II, he becomes king, and he's going to be king for the next 25 years. Okay? He was told he could come back to the throne. By the way, Charles II and James II will flee to France. Okay? So he's restored to the throne if he's willing to share power with Parliament. But he's going to continue to battle the Whigs, a political group within Parliament. Okay? So during this time, they passed something called the Test Act. Okay? Charles II is going to appoint some of the Catholics as justice of the peace, but this requires them to take communion in the Church of England. Okay? So people were afraid he's trying to reestablish the Catholic Church in England, and the way to do that is you force everyone to take communion and really officially become part of the Church of England. He expands colonization, and he gets a bunch of money from France in the form of the Treaty of Dover. And by getting this money, he reintroduces Catholicism to England, but the church is still an Anglican church. Okay, this is going to become a lot more problems for the next leader. The whole thing with Catholicism. So part of him consolidating power is also trying to take care of his colonies in the Americas. And he does this with the Navigation Act. Really, it's passed by Parliament. Okay, and this requires all goods going to or being taken away from England to be transported on English ships. Okay, now part of this is finding out how much everyone's using, and being able to eventually tax them is the goal. Although no one's told that for nearly 100 years, and they're not really ready to do that for 100 years. Colonial merchants ignored the Navigation Acts, but the Dutchmen, who were doing the majority of the trading before England got this together, they were being hurt financially by this. Now, the Anglo-Dutch naval wars. These lasted for 22 years, and this is part of the whole Navigation Act. You know, trying to restrict all the Dutch trade and keeping the Dutch out of American lands. And part of that is because right next to the British colonies, right in the middle of the British colonies, was New Amsterdam, which was the capital of New Netherlands. This is Dutch territory. So eventually what's going to happen is that Charles II is going to attack and take this away from the Dutch, away from poor Peter Stuyvesant, and give it to his stupid brother James II, who will name it just after his area of England he's in charge of, called York. He was the Duke of York, so he names this new land New York. A lot of effort. Okay? So anyway, so poor Peter Stuyvesant, who tried to defend Manhattan Island, is defeated, and the land is given to James II. But Charles is going to live a really, really long time. Okay? So don't worry about him. Oh, so Charles is dead. Okay? And his brother James II comes into power. James II is in power for a total of 3 years. And he's got some problems. He is openly Catholic. Okay? It'd be like trying to be openly gay anywhere in a position of power in the last 10 years. It just wasn't tolerated in the United States until, a couple of years ago. Someday I'll tell you about how different the world is between now and just the time I was in school. And by the way, I'm not saying whenever I was in school was positive, just different. So trying to explain differences, like the difference between cheese and milk. Cheese is made from the cream, which is separated from milk before you get it. If you ever get a chance to drink pure milk, it's quite delicious and a lot sweeter than anything you've had. I don't even know why they separate it. I mean, can you imagine just how delicious milk would be had they not taken the cream away from it? It'd be so much sweeter, so much richer in flavor and taste. But they do that all the time, and they rob us from it. Well, anyway, I feel like I'm off track now. So he was openly Catholic, which was unpopular. And he tried to bring back the divine right of kings. Now, remember, this imbecile's father was beheaded in 1649. So just 36 years earlier, he saw his dad's entire head cut off his entire body until he was dead from it. He doesn't like what the colonies are doing in the Americas, so he creates a Dominion of New England, and he combines together Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Rhode Island into one territory. And this will last until 1689. Then the new people that take over, they kind of fix things. So James II is causing a lot of problems. And, I guess we're going to have to kill another king unless we can find some other type of solution. Okay, what would that be? So, James II has a son, and they're like, oh crap, what are we going to do? Because he's probably going to be worthless like his dad. So they end up going to William of Orange. He is the guy who's in charge of the Netherlands. And they invite him and his wife, Mary. Now, why would they invite these two strangers to take over England? Well, Mary was the daughter of James II. And they thought that there could be a peaceful exchange of power if William and Mary came in instead of, someone else. So she wasn't going to be likely to kill her dad, and her dad probably wouldn't kill her. I don't know if anyone in this room has any daughters, but you kind of don't want to murder your daughters. Kind of. So they were offered the throne, and but there was an arrangement that they had to do some things to get the throne. Okay, so in a bloodless, or ludless, I don't know what a ludless is, not loveless, but bloodless, without killing anyone, they swept into the country, took over, and the only things they had to do was join the Anglican Church and accept the English Bill of Rights. And the English Bill of Rights limits the power of the monarchy and also guarantees the rights of English citizens. James II will live out the rest of his years in France with his son, Mary's brother. It was more of a half brother than a full brother. Okay, that doesn't mean he was only like a person from the torso up or a person from the torso down, but you can't really be a person only from the torso down. Then you just kind of be a lower stump that wasn't alive. So by half brother, I just mean that they had different mothers but the same father. I'm sorry that I had to explain the difference between what a half brother was. But we haven't done that this year, and I don't want to take for granted that all of you know what a half brother is. Okay, so let's talk about some of the great philosophers of the time. We're going to mention a few of them. And we'll start off with Thomas Hobbes. Thomas Hobbes wrote a book by the name of Leviathan. And this is trying to deal with political disorder after the English Civil War. Okay? Saying that the most important thing about life is self-preservation. Okay, morals are great, but, living is more important. Okay? People are born in a state of nature and are always at war with every other person on earth. Okay? And eventually, whenever they do come together, they sign they don't physically sign, but they really come under what's called a social contract. Okay? And, the person that's in charge, who they'll call the sovereign, they are in charge of law. You can't rebel. And you are forbidden from rebelling. And you've kind of agreed, since you live there, that you're going to follow the will of the leader. Okay? And a lot of political philosophers are going to look at this, and they're going to develop their own philosophies and kind of move on from there. So this is kind of one of the first steps in creating our own philosophies and ideas when it comes to government. Now, we're going to go ahead and move on to John Locke, who is one of the more infamous or famous of the philosophers. He writes a book called The Two Treatises on Government. Okay? And he said that all people are born with natural rights. These are life, liberty, and property. Okay? Now, for those of you who are thinking life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, that was Jefferson being poetic in the Declaration of Independence. Okay? I meant Jefferson as in Thomas Jefferson, not my dog George Jefferson, or the character played by Sherman Hemsley named George Jefferson, for which my dog was named after, one of my wife and I's favorite shows growing up. He also believed, and I'm not talking about my dog or the TV star, but Locke believed that all people were born, with natural rights. Sorry, I got sidetracked because my dog's standing right here. Okay, he thought that people created governments to protect them. And if a government didn't protect the people and their rights, they were justified to change it. Okay, so this is in direct contrast to what Hobbes was saying just a few minutes ago. You were allowed to rebel if the government wasn't taking care of you. So in this time following the Glorious Revolution, you have you have Great Britain and Scotland uniting into. I'm sorry. You have England and Scotland uniting into Great Britain. Okay, so here's the creation of Great Britain as we know it. So England, Wales, and Scotland. Although Wales has really not done much. Kind of gets smacked around a lot. Northern Ireland makes Ireland mad. That they don't have that back, and a lot of people fought over that over the years. Anyway. Now, the art from this time period, it's an end to the Renaissance, and you have creation of something called Mannerism. Okay? People were elongated, so you have distorted figures. Very complex composition. You can see all the crap crammed into small areas here. This is the Last Judgment. This is created by Michelangelo in 1542. Okay. I want to say that this is in the Sistine Chapel. I want to say that. But if I'm wrong, then we will all die. So I'm kind of hoping I'm right. Because I hate to think that everyone on Earth would die if I'm wrong. But, just in case that happens, I'm sorry, everybody. Okay, let's look at El Greco. Okay? Dominicos Theotokopoulos. Okay? And he starts to bring in more colors, these yellow and gray colors. Really, the most expensive colors of the time were red. Okay, but you can see some of the vibrant works he's creating with just the yellows and the grays. And really, the best of those is the burial of Count of Orgaz. Okay? So as they're lowering the body into the grave, you have the appearance of Saint Stephen and Saint Augustine appearing to them. Okay, because the man being buried has lived such a the Count of Orgaz has lived such a pious life that he's basically they're going down to welcome him into heaven. So anyway, moving on to the landscapes of Toledo. Okay, so when El Greco, this great Greek painter that lives in Spain, is painting the city, he moves all the buildings around so they're more in an order of importance than where they actually are located. Okay, and then over to the side, he shows where they're all truly located. But it's an interesting juxtaposition, because he values each one of the buildings and their place in society versus where they actually are. So it's kind of interesting the way that this painting's put together. And it's just a time whenever people are doing more and more to interpret what they see going around them. I'm really sorry to say that's all the work we have from El Greco. Unless you count this one. Yeah. Okay. So, in this one, this is called the Lacun. Okay? And you have all of these contorted bodies in front of the city, and they're being attacked by these giant snakes. Okay? Look at the snakes attacking them. Okay? The skies are really dark in the background, and all of this is foreshadowing the impending doom that's coming upon the people on the outskirts of the city. The snakes are coming for all of them. Okay? So, again, some pretty powerful works and something much different than what was being displayed everywhere else. Okay, now, during this time period, you also have Jacopo Tintoretto, and he does a Last Supper. Now, the most famous Last Supper painting was done by Da Vinci, and that was a fresco. Okay, but in this one, you have a much different version. Instead of everything coming and looking directly over the table, you have everything done at an angle instead. Okay, and there's other people there at the Last Supper other than just Jesus and the 12 disciples. Okay, and you have a much smaller painting done on canvas instead of the Last Supper that was done as a fresco. Okay, so you see there the same depiction of the same thing, and it's done within a couple Well, it's done within 100 years of each other, but a much different depiction in how everything's put together. You can see the use of light in the picture above versus the use of light in the picture below. You know, the picture below almost looks like it has light from outside, when the majority of rooms during this time period were much darker, like in the picture above. Anyway, a much more realistic depiction above, even though neither one of them are there. You know, I'm not there to fight that argument. So we have now made it to the end of yet another day. You know, nothing like conquering a day. We talk about conquering lands, but time is the most powerful thing we have to conquer every day. So enjoy your conquest. Okay? We'll have yet another mountain to climb tomorrow. This is Christopher Waldo de la Medium A, and we will see you soon on the other side. Peace, goodwill, and love, but not lust.